Oh my goodness. That look good. That look alright. Then you fix me.
You don't have to do anything.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm not dressed up. I don't have makeup on today.
We'll like,
What if I laugh?
when she's talking, we'll like paste her face on it, and then it like boop, and then.
Hey everyone. Today I have a really special guest. He's a friend, Brandon. Actually, he's also a coworker. We met at Lyft, right?
We did. We were introduced through a mutual friend.
Yeah, he's right here, but off camera.
Hello.
But yeah, he's actually a part-time programmer, full-time model. So.
Oh my god. I don't think I can take it if you threw in those. Holy, you can't handle. Okay.
So recently, Brandon went to USC. So he graduated from USC and he went back this time as an interviewer. So he came back like from the other side. And we were eating lunch and he was just like talking about his experiences and it seemed really interesting, you know. And he brought up a lot of points of like what the students are doing well and also what the students weren't doing well. So since this interview season, I thought like the viewers, you would probably really appreciate those points too. So, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. So I did, like Jeffrey mentioned, I graduated from USC. I was actually a business major, but I was really interested in computer science, which is why I eventually got into software engineering. I've been working at Lyft for a year as a front-end engineer, and it's been a great experience so far. I'm happy to be on the channel.
Growing with Jeffrey.
Growing with Jeffrey, yeah. Very exciting.
Yeah, okay, so I guess first, like, what was it like going back as an interviewer instead of an interviewee? Did you ever go to the job fairs as a student? Yeah,
so I did go to job fairs as a student. I wouldn't say I went back as an interviewer. I guess I went there more as like a presenter, or we did talk to students, but it wasn't like a formal interview or anything. So yeah, I have gone to job fairs before. I actually got my first job offer from a job fair, so I'm personally pretty fond of them. But yeah, it was a pretty surreal experience because I remember waiting in those lines to talk to like these companies, and it's pretty surreal to be on the other side, having a bunch of students wait like hours to talk to you.
Did you feel special?
I did feel very special. It was also like a lot of responsibility because you know that they see you as a representative for Lyft, especially a company as big as Lyft. People have a lot of questions, so at times it was definitely intimidating, and you're trying to give everybody good answers. But it's sometimes hard when people ask like about like business strategy or like things outside of like your team. It's like pretty hard to answer, but hopefully I did a good job and hopefully people got a good impression.
That's good.
Yeah.
Did your jaw ever get tired from just talking so much?
My jaw was okay. I don't put my jaw into it too much, but definitely your voice gets pretty tired. I think we were out there for 5 hours, so we started around 10.
Gosh.
We went all the way to 3, and it was like LA heat too. Yeah. So it was pretty hot. I eventually started taking students like into the shade, like away from the tent.
Oh wow.
Because the tent wasn't very good because the LA heat, the sun was like still straight into our eyes. So yeah, it did get pretty hot.
It was outdoors, right?
It was outdoors, yeah. I think that was also one of like the biggest differences. I think usually career fairs at schools are indoors.
Yeah, mine was right.
Yeah, I think usually they're indoors. But at USC it was outdoors, and it was still like summer heat in LA, so that was pretty rough.
So now that you're like on the other side, what do you think your students don't realize about people being on the other side, like the people representing these companies and talking to the students? Yeah,
I think students know that usually when you're talking to representatives at a company that they talk to a lot of students. I don't think it's possible to grasp how many students you talk to until you're on the other side, like actually talking to students. So I think that was probably like the biggest shock, was that it wasn't even that I didn't want to give every student like individual attention and to remember like everything that each person did. At a certain point, once you've talked to like 20, 30, 40, 50 students, and like especially if their names are similar, like it gets really hard to keep track of who you talk to, and like even like the people who were impressive like stopped standing out, like really, because there was such a high volume of students that I was talking to. It was like the extreme standouts that I could even still remember at the end of the day. I think that's like probably like one of the biggest things I realized, like having been on the other side. And also it's pretty, you have a pretty limited amount of time to sort of grab the interviewer's attention, I guess, in this case. And as a student, I just had like a generic script that I gave to people, and like for me it still worked because I did get an offer at a company at one point, but in general, you really wanna try to differentiate yourself, because just by like if you tell somebody your experience, chances are like 30 other students have like that same experience or similar experience, and it's still like fairly hard to differentiate. And normally, like companies don't have the headcount to handle like if 200 students line up to talk to like a company like Lyft, we don't have headcount for everyone, and so you have to really think of ways to stand out and to at least be different than everyone else.
Right.
Yeah.
So then what would you say like were some of the ways that worked for you that made certain students stand out?
Yeah. So I guess when I was talking to students, I think the core of the problem about most career fairs is that there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of students that potentially are in line just because they saw Lyft or they saw Google or they saw like a big company name, and they're like, oh crap, like I gotta line up and like talk to them too. That's usually not a great strategy from my experience, because you could sort of tell the students who didn't have like a lot of research beforehand. And when you're already dealing with like hundreds of students, you really want to have done your research. So the students that really stood out to me personally were the ones that you could tell were genuinely passionate and like ask questions, and when I answered them, they had follow-up questions, so you could tell they were really thinking about my answers.
They were really engaged.
Yeah, they were like genuinely engaged. There were so many students that sort of gave me their resume, asked the question because you're supposed to ask a question, and then I gave them the answer like, all right, thank you very much. You know, like it's really hard to stand out like that. And I think a lot of like directed questions. So I think a lot of students ask very broad questions, which are okay to ask, I think. But I would always at least have like one question, maybe your first question, be something a little more targeted. Like I had a student specifically ask about Envoy, which is an open source project at Lyft. So like instantly, as soon as they asked that question, I knew like they had done their research. They know what Lyft is about, they know our projects, and he asked like very specific questions regarding that. It wasn't just like a general like, oh like
how's your culture?
How's your culture? Or, like what's your day-to-day like work thing? And then like you answer and they're like no questions, or all right, thank you. Like you know that they just like recycled that one, you know?
Yeah.
And you could still like, if you're genuinely curious about culture or about like the day-to-day life of a developer at that specific company, definitely still ask those questions, but I would have those actually be a follow-up after like a more directed question. I think that's how I'd approach it. Yeah.
So basically like do a lot of research for the companies that you really want.
Yeah, it sounds pretty straightforward, but yeah, I would definitely do your research. You'd be surprised at how many students don't do their research or don't even know like what jobs are available. Like specifically when I was at USC, we were hiring for Lyft Level 5, which is our autonomous wing. And there were a lot of students that came up and weren't interested in autonomous jobs, which is also okay, but you can tell they were caught off guard when I told them that, oh, we're specifically trying to hire for autonomous, and like all of our branding is our autonomous branding, and they're like, oh, okay, that's very cool. And then you can tell they're like kind of caught off guard.
What's autonomous?
Right, exactly. Or some people are like, oh, why is this called Level 5? I'm like, oh dear, like you didn't even read up on like anything that we're doing, which is not a great way to try to have a good impression. Yeah.
But no, now our viewers know. Our viewers will now do the research on the companies that they want.
Look forward to good questions. Tran, what do you think?
Good job.
Have you been learning?
Research.
So is there like anything else that you want to talk about?
Yeah, one of the things that I wanted to mention, which I kind of noticed, is that, and this is sort of along the lines of earlier, like the quality of the questions, but I noticed a lot of students sort of approach recruiting, at least for bigger companies, sort of like shotgun style. So they just try to give their resumes to as many companies as possible and hope they get a response back. And I think, I'm not sure if that works for like smaller startups, that might work a little better, but at least for big companies like Lyft, Google, Facebook, like all the big companies, we already get so many applications that just dropping your resume generally doesn't get you that far. So I would spend the time, so rather than spending time going around to every company and then giving them your resume and like asking like a question just for the sake of asking a question, I would really focus on like doing research on like one or two companies, which is something I already kind of mentioned. But really focus on companies that you're interested in, because like your enthusiasm when you're talking to a company you've genuinely like done your research for and you genuinely want to work for, like does show through compared to like the other students who haven't done that work.
So I was definitely guilty of the shotgun.
Yeah.
I basically hit all the big companies.
Yeah.
And then afterward, then I'm like, I think I heard of them. Here's a resume.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then,
Did you get a lot of? I'm curious too. Like, did you get a lot of responses from companies
Um,
where you just did give resumes to?
no. But then, like, I guess,
Yeah.
like, for the big companies I lined up for,
Yeah.
so one thing that I asked you at the lunch was, like, did anyone demo their project? And that's what, like,
Oh, right.
that was my trick.
Yeah.
I guess your trick is, like, do your research and ask, like, really, like, pointed and pinpointed questions.
Right, right.
Mine is to demo my project. Because, like, anyone could, like, hype up their project on the resume and, like, talk about it, hype it up, right?
Yeah.
Like, people can be really good salesmen.
Yep.
But I'm really bad at selling shit.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I just let my product speak for itself because, like, I put a lot of time into it and a lot of, like, thought and effort. So people will see when they look at it, they could be like, oh, this is, like, not trivial.
Right, right.
So when I
Yeah.
show people my side project, they'd be like, oh, and then they just, like, you know, I'll give
Yeah.
you an interview.
Yeah, for sure. I think so. So if you did do that, I think if any student did come up and like show me, like talk to me about what they're working on, and then demo their project, that would have been like pretty impactful. I just happened to not like I just didn't see anybody doing that, so I didn't think of it. But that's like one of those good ideas that I think would make you stand out. So definitely not there's not one way to sort of stand out. You can ask like really good questions. You can demo your app. I had one, and I mean, don't do this like if everybody did this, it wouldn't really mean anything anymore. But I did, like, as an example, I did have one student specifically. He memorized the job IDs of the 2 jobs he wanted to apply for specifically at Lyft, which I thought was pretty impressive because these are just like it's just like a 8-digit number, and he knew exactly what he wanted. But he wasn't like very pretentious about it. He was just like, oh hey, like just to make sure there's no like confusion. I also just memorized it to like let you know so you guys know exactly like what I'm trying to go for. And like that was impressive, obviously. I mean, I'm not saying remember,
But he could have just, like, printed it out too, right?
he could have, but like when he told me, it was like just like recited from memory. Yeah. I thought that was impressive. I mean, it wasn't just that was impressive. It was that plus his enthusiasm, and you could tell that he did his research. But that was like one of the signals that, you know, like you can't memorize like 15 companies' job IDs and like go up, you know, like he cared. You can tell like he cared and he like really wanted it. He did stand out compared to the other people. Cool. Yeah.
Okay, I guess I'll just add one more thing.
Sure. True.
I guess another trick that I had was like, when I went to job fairs, I did the shotgun approach and I only got like the big companies because I demoed. But then my other trick, which I mentioned in like job fair video like last year, was like I got most of my interviews actually. Like my first 2 big internships, which were Yelp and Hulu, both of them were from Career Talks. I mean, Tech Talks.
Right.
Like, I think one of them, for Yelp, I showed up like early, and then I talked to the recruiter, I talked to the engineer, and I stayed for his talk, and after the talk, I had no idea what he talked about.
Yeah.
So I think ideally I would have asked him about his talk.
Right.
Actually listened, actually took notes, and actually asked him like relevant questions. Although everyone sort of knows that like people are there just to like drop the resume and just to like get the interview, right? Like, you actually did a tech talk.
Yeah, so there was actually a tech talk at USC as well that I presented in, and it was very clear. Actually, like when we first started like accepting questions, or like after the thing, and like we were just engaging with students, we had a lot of like half the room came to the front, and like we got absolutely swarmed, and everybody was trying to give me their life story, whereas like that wasn't like the point. The point was like questions, right? So I like specifically announced to everyone, I'm like, hey, we don't have time for like to talk about like your experience right now. Just like this is just for questions. But if you do want to drop your resume, you can put them here. And then like literally like 70% of the students just like dropped the resume and like left. So that was an interesting experience. I would have thought that the people who were there like actually had questions, but I guess most of them just wanted to drop their resume, and their questions were mostly just like to be courteous and to ask a question, not just like, hey, here's my resume, bye. But yeah.
I asked, it's really interesting. I asked my, like the engineer who gave the talk, I asked him like if he wanted to get curry.
Oh my god.
But then I also told him like, oh,
Yeah.
like there's this really good curry place you have to go to, and then
Yeah.
I asked him like, what's like
Wait, this
your-
was for Yelp, right?
for Yelp.
Okay,
yeah.
that's like a decent strategy for Yelp. I feel like.
Yeah. I also asked him like, what's your biggest regret?
Yeah.
And then he was really like surprised, and he gave me like a really thoughtful answer that
Yeah.
I don't remember right now. But then like when I got my offer
Yeah.
for Yelp, I was talking to my recruiter, and then I asked her the same question, and she was like, "Wait, were you at San Diego, and did you talk to the engineer named Ryan, and did you ask him the same question?" And I was like,
Oh wow.
"Oh yeah, I did. Why?" And she was like, "Oh, like afterwards he told me about this one student who asked him this question, and he was really interesting, and like you made our whole plane ride back to San Francisco. Like they were just talking about me the whole."
Wow.
So it's just like, yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah. And then for Hulu, I had to go. I think I double booked Tech Talks or something. Like, there was a Tech Talk, but then I had to go somewhere or like go to class. But then before his talk, I was like, "Oh, do you mind if I just like talk to you really quickly about like my side project?" So he was like, "Yeah, sure." He took me aside. We sat down, and then like I showed him my project. I like did my pitch,
Right.
and then he gave me an interview, and then
Wow.
yeah, and then I passed, and then it's really interesting. Like when I was interning, like when I was actually interning at Hulu, at the time he already left the company, and I completely forgot like what he looked like or whatever. But then like
Yeah.
in our nearby food court, I was getting lunch, and then
When you like bumped into him?
he bumped into
Oh,
me,
he
and he
bumped
was like,
into you.
"Oh, did you?" Well,
Well.
the video automatically closed, so we don't know when it stopped
Yeah.
recording.
Hopefully most of what we said was recorded.
Yeah. Oh well. So, wait, do you want to talk about it
Julius?
now?
Or would it be? I think it would be a separate video, right?
Yeah, it would be a separate video.
Master speaks.
Okay, like,
True.
Another time then, right?
No,
Jan's
it
gotta,
could
like-
be. It could be just like part 2.
Jan's
But
gotta.
then it's literally like Brandon like looking at the side, like you looking at the screen,
Yeah,
looking
yeah,
at the
that's
wall, like. This is
No, we'll paste like a.
I mean, I can just like be in the video next time.
She wants to be in the video.
No, I don't want. To be
That she wants to
I
be in the
can-
video.
I can- But then I need to like prepare a little bit.
I could blur your face out.
No, it's
Mysterious.
It's because if you want to do like a whole separate video, I have to like think of stuff.
That's true. Yeah.
How about I'll just ask you a few questions, and you can just answer them, and then next time we'll have like a more structured thing.
Okay, yeah, if you want. Sure.
Okay.